Hi, I'm Jessa, and this is part of a series of videos to help with revision for the RICS Assessment of Professional Competence. Today, I'm doing an overview of the competency for client care. In particular, I'll talk about establishing client requirements, delivery of services, and other considerations. This video does not include client money handling, which is covered separately, and you should bear in mind I work as a quantity surveyor, so most of the examples come from a QS perspective. As always, you can find my timestamps, sources, and a link to some example questions in the description below. Establishing client requirements. When we're starting to work with clients on new projects, surveyors need to gather enough information to determine what the project and client's needs and expectations are, and that this is within the bounds of their firm's competency and insurance cover. The best way to obtain this information is through a meeting, ideally in person, to clearly discuss and understand the client. The RICS has produced a client briefing meeting checklist for topics to cover when meeting the client, including project goals, budget and parameters, stakeholders, organisational structures, and so on. Once the necessary topics have been covered, notes of this meeting can be recorded and analysed to inform the client brief. The brief could include the following: scope of work, including the tasks to be done, the deliverables and the required outputs and formats, the duration of the service, fees to be charged, professional indemnity limits, and any other risks, issues, or conditions. Surveyors may also need to incorporate further data gathering beyond the initial client meeting, including site-based information and evaluations from previous projects or related projects already delivered by your firm. This wider information will help provide further considerations which could impact the services delivered and the risks that come with the project. Once the brief has been clearly set out, it should be sent to the client to confirm that this aligns with their expectations. If it does, then a more detailed appointment document may be drafted. Appointment document. RICS members are obliged to record the terms of their appointments in writing, so an appointment document is typically used for clients and surveyors to enter into contract with one another. The RICS provides standard forms of appointment, which sets out key definitions and contractual terms for different kinds of projects. The standard form of consultant's appointment is more detailed, intended to be used for normal, complex, medium or large service appointments, whilst the short form is for less complex, smaller projects. There is also the short form for designated services, where specialist surveying services are required. On the website, these have been produced for England and Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, as well as relevant explanatory notes, which provide detail on understanding, preparing, and using the standard appointment documents. Generally, the sections of these appointment documents include definitions, consultant and client obligations, fee and payment terms, limitations of liability and insurance, termination of engagement, and dispute resolution. There could be sections for health and safety, collateral warranties, and so on, which will depend on the firms involved in the agreement and the nature of the project. The standard forms of appointment also include schedules and appendices at the end, where other key documents can be included in the agreement. One example of a key schedule to the appointment document is the scope of services, and the RICS has produced lists for different surveying disciplines, including technical due diligence, quantity surveyor, employer's agent and contract administration, project manager, and building surveyor services. Each of these scopes of services sets out a checklist of tasks that could be provided by the discipline at varying stages of projects. For avoidance of doubt in the appointment, the ticked items in the checklist are those which are included in the fee, and any that are not are deemed additional and may be subject to additional monies if required. There is also an appendix which contains details of meetings that the surveyor is expected to attend throughout the project. If there are any additional services not listed that will be completed under the terms of appointment, this should be inserted into the scope of services. It's important to make sure that the services delivered are within yours and your firm's competencies, and that this is covered by professional indemnity insurance. If in doubt about whether the service is included, consult with your insurance providers. And if you're still unsure after that, the instruction should not be accepted to maintain integrity in the profession. Fees. Having fees agreed with the client is important to client care to ensure expectations are met and to maintain trust with our professional relationships. Fees should be proportionate to the services delivered, and we should always be able to justify how they are calculated. Your firm may have an established price list for straightforward works, Or you may propose another charging structure, such as an hourly rate or fixed percentage based on construction costs or performance-based fees. Regardless of the charging structure, it is good practice to provide at least an initial estimate for the services delivered, including what outcomes are included, anything that's excluded, payment terms, timescales, and details of the people that will be carrying out the work and their qualifications. This will maintain transparency with your clients and avoid any surprises later down the line. Once all the terms of engagement and contracts have been agreed, then of course we're in a position to actually deliver the services. The RICS's third rule of conduct says to provide a good quality and diligent service, and this section provides guidance on how we can do that. Stakeholders. On all projects, there will be others involved beyond just the named party on the appointment document. Even within client organisations themselves, there might be multiple levels of hierarchy, so it could take a few weeks to approve decisions, or they may have funders that require certain information, so you might need to consider a suitable format for your documents. Anyone who has some kind of interest in a construction project is considered a stakeholder. This can include those who are directly working on the project, or those who might have influence on the project, such as investors, or those who are affected by the project, like the end user. To establish any relevant stakeholders in your appointment, it's useful to collate a list of who you'll be engaging with or looking at the project directory. The project directory is useful as it should set out any protocols to follow, say who is the main point of contact from each organisation and how to reach them. Sometimes, especially on complex projects, you may need to evaluate how much engagement each of these stakeholders require and how the relationship will be managed. For example, on one of my projects where the client is part of a joint venture, meaning there are two organisations funding the project, I'm only working for one of these. For my client, I would have a lot more involvement in day-to-day communication, then medium levels of engagement with the project team, and potentially low level of engagement with the other delivery party to minimise any conflicts of interest. By keeping track of the engagement, this enables the stakeholders and their audit trails to be easily identified, and there can be changes made if required. During your projects, it's useful to regularly consider your project team's performance. You might find that within the team, you're not receiving the information needed to deliver your services on time, which could impact the overall project progress and your relationship with the client. It could be worth raising to the project manager that you might be delayed for these reasons, or speaking with team members privately to check if there are any issues or whether you can get certain information earlier to make a start on your services. This should be done with consideration to maintain morale within the team and keep relationships strong. This is more likely to encourage a successful delivery, maximise team performance, and increase potential for future business. Communication. Poor communication is one of the main causes of client relationship problems. Establishing agreed forms of communication upon appointment and maintaining these throughout the project ensure smoother delivery. Some key considerations for communication are: lead contacts. Who will manage the day-to-day contact regarding the project? This is often better as a single individual to maintain clarity, though it is also useful to know who else from the organisation will be working on the project in the event that the lead contact is unavailable to respond. Information management. How will information be shared and stored? This could be via email, with organisations saving projects in their own internal systems, or there could be use of BIM or other software for project notifications. On some of my projects, we have used software for the more formal and contractual notifications, and emails and calls for the less formal correspondence. Escalation points. Having a more senior point of contact to oversee the delivery provides the client with the means of an easy route to raise any concerns or matters that they might otherwise find difficult to say to the lead contact. And confidentiality. Keep relevant information private with non-disclosure agreements, and agree how projects will be publicised, and how any conflicts of interest could be handled so that these procedures can be followed accordingly. Providing value for money. There generally isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to the services delivered, and sometimes we may need to offer our clients with some options for how to fulfill the instruction within their parameters and constraints. Say, for example, that our client has a limited budget. We could advise on which services could be provided in an alternative way, such as site visits. I'm a quantity surveyor, So an example could be that we tie in our valuations with the monthly site progress meeting to reduce the need for 2 site visits per month and therefore reducing fee. An options appraisal can be provided as part of the client brief for the client to decide what works best for their needs in the formal appointment documents. You will also need to know about the principles of preparing different documents, which depend on your pathway. As a general principle, it's a good idea to send initial drafts at the beginning of a project for the client to approve the format and make any comments. By sending these drafts in advance, it means that the information is clearly set out according to their requirements. As a quantity surveyor, I might issue monthly cost reports on a project, so when preparing these, I make sure that any relevant sections are included. Say if there are direct costs that the client wants included, or maybe my client wants a comparison of where the costs sit against the approved budget and contingency and not just the contract sum. I have found that this format can evolve throughout projects, and I provide a high quality service by responding and adapting to changes that my clients request. Other considerations for providing clients good value for money are maintaining professionalism, demonstrating competence, being punctual and reliable, including providing regular communication, and frequent review of services delivered, which I'll discuss in the next segment. Evaluation. By regularly reviewing the service we are delivering, this enables continual improvement and increases the quality for our clients. One way to review the standards provided include key performance indicators or KPIs, which monitor our ongoing performance. Some things our organizations might measure on our projects include client satisfaction with the service provided, the predicted versus actual time taken to undertake tasks, and the costs and profitability of the job. We should also ask our clients for feedback on how we're doing, in things such as overall performance, value for money, and quality of the service. And this can be done either directly through our firms or commissioning an independent party, which may enable clients to be more honest. This process should be carried out regularly throughout the project to identify and rectify any issues, and then of course at the end to bring the lessons learned to our future endeavours. Other considerations. For the last section of this video, I'll talk about a few other considerations, including compliance with insurance and legal requirements, conflicts of interest, complaints, and competence. Compliance with insurance and legal requirements. RICS members need to ensure that they are complying with the law applicable to the area of practice and of course the RICS requirements. In the UK, some of the applicable legislation includes the Employment Relations Act, Carers Leave Regulations, Protection from Redundancy, Paternity Leave Regulations, Holiday Entitlement, and Employment Contracts. Ultimately, employees' contracts will impact the level of client care and provide clients with realistic expectations for service delivery. For example, in the UK, in accordance with the 1998 Working Time Regulations, generally you can't average more than 48 hours a week, so it should set clients with realistic timescales to deliver our services to ensure that legislation is met. As part of the RICS Rules of Conduct, firms must ensure that all previous and current professional work is covered by adequate and appropriate professional indemnity cover that meets RICS approved standards. These are as follows: each and every claims basis, or aggregate plus unlimited round-the-clock reinstatement basis. Deliverance costs should be in addition to the limit of indemnity. RICS minimum policy wording to ensure that it's written on a full civil liability basis. Minimum level of indemnity based on the firm's turnover in the previous year, or if you're a new firm, the estimated turnover. These do change from time to time, but as at January 2025, these are as per the table on the screen. There are also maximum levels of uninsured excess, or the part of each claim that the firm must pay itself. PII policies need to have fully retroactive cover, so all former work is covered from past and present employees, and it needs to be underwritten by a listed insurer. If the firm ceases to practice, there should be run-off cover, so firms, employees, and their clients are not financially exposed after the business is shut down. There are some exceptions, so surveyors should refer to the latest professional indemnity insurance requirements to ensure their compliance. Conflicts of interest. Before accepting instructions from our clients, Surveyors need to make sure that their service isn't impacted by potential conflicts of interest. I've talked about this in a separate video for the Ethics, Rules of Conduct and Professionalism Competency. To summarise, it's best to avoid conflicts of interest to ensure there's nothing compromising our professional duties, but sometimes there could be potential conflicts. We might be acting for a client that has conflicting interests with another client or even your own organisation. If a conflict is found, we must obtain informed consent to show that the client fully understands the conflict and any impacts and is still happy to appoint the surveyor. Even if a client is willing to give informed consent, RICS members must exercise professional judgment and determine whether this is in the best interests of the client or whether we should recommend another colleague or organisation. There could also be a confidential information conflict, where an obligation to provide information to one client conflicts with another's requirement to keep the information confidential. To manage this, we might have non-disclosure agreements setting out the limitations, and firms may have information barriers, such as working in separate locations and electronic separation with locked access to the file stores. This can prevent confidential information passing between those in the same firm. Complaints. I also have a separate video on complaints handling if you want to check that out. But as a very quick summary, once a complaint has been received, your firm should have a complaints handling procedure readily available as per the RICS Rules of Conduct. When a client complains, we need to listen and acknowledge the situation, send them a copy of the complaints handling procedure and who will be the main point of contact on the matter. Most matters are resolved relatively easily, though if it looks like this could escalate, the firm's professional indemnity insurance provider should be notified if they haven't already, and the firm should conduct any additional investigations. We need to keep record of correspondence relating to complaints, and once the matter has been resolved, we should reflect on this to reduce the chance of a similar complaint happening again. Competence. Throughout any client appointments, we need to ensure we're communicating with our project teams effectively and not using jargon to those who won't understand it, such as lay clients or members of the public. Keep advice clear, concise, and simple, and record information so that there is a full audit trail. With any verbal advice, this should be backed up in writing. Some examples are, if something is confirmed over the phone, to write an email summarising the conversation, or if we have an in-person meeting, then tracking what is said via minutes. This audit trail helps keep track of projects and also assists in the event of professional negligence claim to provide relevant evidence. To deliver the best possible service, sometimes we might have to say no to prospective opportunities, say if there are potential conflicts, if it's not covered under insurance, or if your organisation doesn't have the appropriate skill set. You could direct potential clients to RICS Find a Surveyor or recommend other suitable professionals. Thanks for watching this video. If you have anything else to add, please feel free to leave a comment or contact me on my socials in the description. I'm also making other videos to help with revision for the APC final interview, so check out my channel for more on that, or for more content to do with mental health, sustainability, and construction. That's all I have to say for now. I hope it helped build on your mind.